since the announcement that RedBird Capital, alongside people like Billy Beane and Richard Scudamore, had raised a $545 million SPAC, or Special Purpose Acquisition Company, a listed vehicle, effectively an IPO, to go out and buy a company in sports. Typically a franchise is how it's been described. There's obviously been a lot of chat in the sports industry as to what team they're going to buy, and I've read stories about it's going to be Liverpool, it's going to be this club, it's going to be that club, and SPACs are suddenly all the rage. And I think there's a couple of things we need to discuss around a SPAC. And thankfully 2 years ago, before I joined FIFA, actually raising a SPAC to do a roll-up in the sports industry was one of the projects I was looking at, and thankfully became a little bit more educated as to what they meant, how they worked, and what this effective shell company on a stock exchange meant. So if you take the RedBird Capital one, and they would have done all their background, and they're very smart and successful financiers, raising $545 million actually means they're looking to invest probably around 1.5 billion. And the reason for that is effectively the investors and those that are launching a SPAC have what you call a promote, and it becomes effective at a certain level of money spent, and makes the warrants worthwhile. So if you're looking at how they typically work, if you've got 545 million of cash, looking to spend 1.5, a significant portion of that is, of course, going to be debt. Now we have to look at the sports industry and think, okay, how many companies in the sports industry are worth in excess of 1.5 billion? Because they don't necessarily have to buy the whole company. In fact, a lot of SPACs don't buy the whole company, buy a stake in a business to float it. So, if the company has to be at least worth 1.5 billion, in terms of football clubs, let's take the UK. Well, the apparent value of City is in excess of 4 or 5 billion. The Man United's already floated. Chelsea turned down a deal in excess of 2 billion from, according to press reports. So Liverpool, having just won Champions League and the Premier League, 2 billion sounds about right. So you get down to a very small number of clubs, because once you get beyond, say, Arsenal and Tottenham, down to the Evertons and Newcastle of the world, we're talking about a 300 to 500 million pound business rather than 2 or 3 billion. So in Europe, how many sports teams are actually worth 1 to 3 billion pounds that this could be interesting to invest in? Not many. Hence why they have language in their SPAC that allows them to buy anything in the sports media entertainment space, because there are gambling companies that are certainly worth that amount of money and might be a better investment for a SPAC. And why might that be a better investment for a SPAC? I'm not sure there are too many sports businesses that should be on the stock exchange. And I think, look at Chime's sports marketing and its time on the stock exchange, as to, market analysts don't really understand that sports works on effectively, if you're in a marketing business, biannual, because of all the quadrennials, you're doing this, and they want to see a nice 5-10% growth every quarter. So do you fit on the public markets? Can your company support 500 million of debt and the interest payments on that? And the paranoia that fans have of a football team having debt, and the journalists around it. Think of the amount of debt someone like Man United have, and the constant thinking of, oh my God, how can they have this much debt? It's outrageous, both from the fans and from the media. So can they afford the payments on that? Man United can, but most clubs are not cash generative like Man United. So can they afford the debt? Should they be on the public markets? How many of them are worth that kind of value? I think a SPAC is a wonderful idea. I think RedBird will probably make a cracking go of this and do a really good job. And they've got some very bright people on the board as operating partners, and I wish them all the success. And they've certainly done some interesting deals away from the SPACs in a more typical PE fashion. But before we all get too carried away, just take those simple premises: debt, valuation, public markets, as basic principles of, is it appropriate for sport?